was like, it's like having some big, party the night before, and then you're like, all right, it's a great Star Wars party, and I'm drinking, and we hooked up, and we had a blast, and then the next day, you're like, wait a minute, what happened last night at that Star Wars party? What did I do? Like... Hello and welcome back to WAKA Geek Talk, and it's time for my delayed Obi Wan Kenobi show review, which I meant to do per episode, as you may have known I said before, and then I got behind because I was in and out of town, and then I got conflicted about the show. And after like the fourth episode, I was going to do a review in the fourth episode, and I suddenly realized I'm not sure what I think about this show. I like parts of it, I don't like others, and I kind of decided to just wait until the full show aired and do a complete review. And I've gone back and looked over parts of it a second time, rewatched parts. First of all, it was an entertaining show, but it also was one of those shows where it made me wonder about a lot of things when it comes to continuity and canon. And I do think that that is important. And I'll talk about that later. There will be spoilers a little bit later on. But it was very different from the other Star Wars shows, and it just proved to me, once again, that with Disney's Star Wars, it's all over the map. I mean, you might get, depending on the producer of each project, movie or show, you get a very different interpretation on the world of Star Wars. And this one, I think, hits a lot of good notes, but it also raises a lot of interesting questions. Now, when I said my thing about, well, you regret it in the morning, what I mean is, yeah, the show was fun and entertaining in the moment, and I was like, it's like having some big, party the night before, and then you're like, all right, it's a great Star Wars party, and I'm drinking, and we hooked up, and we had a blast, and then the next day, you're like, wait a minute, what happened last night at that Star Wars party? What did I do? Like, did we make the right decisions? Did things make sense? So that's kind of how I felt like. After each episode, I would be like, oh, this is great, I want to see the next episode. Then only later, I'd be like, wait a minute, what happened again? Why did they do that? How does that affect episode 4 coming up? Now, first of all, if you like my reviews, please hit the subscribe button if you want more WAKA or WAKA content. I do like to do reviews of all kinds of geek culture, movies, animation, TV shows, with a humorous twist, I think. So please subscribe to the YouTube channel. Check us out on Facebook. All right, so let's talk about Obi Wan Kenobi. So the show flows well and is edited well, more so than the Book of Boba Fett. And I'm one of those people that liked the Book of Boba Fett. However, I didn't love it. And I understand why a lot of people didn't like it. I mean, I think one thing about it was the pacing was weird. It went fast, slow. There wasn't nearly as much action as people thought until the last episode. And I think one episode was like 90% flashback. So this one, however, it flows. Each episode flows and makes you want to watch the next one. That's a good thing. Another good thing about it is we've got Ewan McGregor. And Obi-Wan, I mean, he's great as Obi Wan Kenobi. He always has been. He was one of the best parts of the prequels, and here he's back doing it about as best as he can. And when I say as best as he can, there are moments in the writing where I'm like, I don't really see that this matches up with Kenobi in the future or the past. But Ewan McGregor, that's not his fault. He did as best as he could selling this interpretation of what Obi-Wan Kenobi's doing with his life. And what is he doing with his life? Well, this show starts 10 years later. 10 years after Revenge of the Sith is over, and he's living on Tatooine, working, getting by, living as a hermit. Apparently he smells bad, according to a Jawa, of all things, tells him he stinks and needs a bath. And he's kind of watching out for Luke from a distance. And then, what messes up his whole piece, of course, is along come Inquisitors sent to find not just Jedi, but even Force-sensitive children. In particular, the most precocious one of them, the most bold one of them, is Reva here, played very well by Moses Ingram, who is looking for Obi-Wan Kenobi specifically. And she seems to be on a special mission to find him because Vader apparently is obsessed with finding him. Yeah, even though it's 10 years later. Really? You can't move on, Vader, 10 years later? So the show starts off great, but it's like a relationship that's fun at first. You're like, oh man, this person is so fun and attractive and smart, and then red flags start popping up. The show begins to unravel a bit in the back of the mind when you begin to question why people are doing what they're doing. Now, I will say the first thing that kind of took me out of the show a little bit was this whole 10 years later thing, okay? I mean, it looks like Obi Wan Kenobi here is only just a little bit moved on from where he was in episode 3. To me, the show should have been set 5 years later. And I'll talk about some things at the end of this review that I think should have been done differently. And he doesn't look like he's really only 9 years away from looking like this. Now, I know that some people, especially the Hollywood Reporter and others, have tried to, say, well, 9 years later, Ewan McGregor will only be 3 years younger than Alec Guinness, so it's not that far off. Okay, fine, technically, yes, but Ewan McGregor is a much younger looking person in general, I think. And I know he's a different actor, so he's not going to look just like Alec Guinness. Okay, fine. I kind of wish that they'd given him a little bit more gray in the beard and along the side, just a little bit, It doesn't look like he spent 10 years on Tatooine. Also, I kind of felt like here, the way they wrote Kenobi is he's more like Kenobi the coward. I guess 10 years have really defeated him, because something else that also I noticed weird is that he seems to have lost all contact with the Force. And he's not really using it anymore. And that's odd, because I don't think Obi Wan Kenobi would do that. I never got the impression he would do that before. It seems like they did that to give him kind of a journey of coming back to finding the Force. But I didn't think that was necessary, and not how I would have interpreted Kenobi, but I know my interpretation is not the only one, of course. But it is weird at first. Now, I know that this show had multiple revisions, and originally it was going to be a movie or 3 movies. And one of the writers of that recently has done some interviews, and he talked about some of the differences and things he wanted to do. And I'm curious as to when they combined that story and combined the other versions of this show, if they forgot to cut out and leave some things in, because it doesn't seem like he's cut off from the Force at first. In fact, he might seem like a coward in some moments, but when he has to fight, he kicks butt. I mean, he's hand-to-hand combat, he's excellent. And his blaster skills are better than they've ever been. So it seems like he's getting help from the Force. Otherwise, what have you been doing for 10 years? Fighting on a regular basis to be this good? If you forgot the Force, but you remember how to kick some serious butt, I mean, while you're living as a hermit, just meditate. I don't know. It seemed like there were some things that they forgot to kind of tie up there with the interpretation on what Kenobi's been doing or what his powers are. But the other thing about the 10 years that was odd is I just didn't think that Vader would still be obsessed with him 10 years later, or that they'd still be looking for Kenobi 10 years later. Because the problem that creates is it cuts into the whole thing in episode 4 where Obi-Wan, and the memes have been making this really funny, like, Kenobi, Obi-Wan, that's a name I haven't heard in a long, long time. Or is this meme, just a few years ago, really, So it's like, you always got the impression that it was about 20 years, 19 years between episode 3 and 4, and that no one's called him that since then. And it makes more sense with what Grand Moff Tarkin says, where he's like, Obi-Wan Kenobi? Surely he must be dead by now. Well, that's my terrible Tarkin impression. But, yeah, I mean, if it was just 9 years ago that Obi-Wan Kenobi came back on the scene and kicked some serious butt and fought with the Empire and Vader again, spoilers, well, not so automatic that he must be dead by now, or that he hasn't heard that name in forever. Just kind of things I wondered. And now I know there's been some publications, some people that are trying to dismiss any of those concerns, like, oh, whatever, canon, schmanon, continuity between the episodes doesn't matter. Okay, if you're one of those canon, schmanon people, you don't care about continuity, fine, but then you really shouldn't be trying to watch a science fiction series that has movies on either side. I think you should pay attention to it. But also, if you're the kind of person that says you don't care about continuity or canon, I'm never going to recommend a murder mystery book to you. And I'm never going to read one that you recommend, because clearly the evidence and the facts and the clues don't mean jack. Like, anybody could be the murderer to you. You'd be like, oh yeah, I think the butler did it. I'm like, well, the butler was on the phone in the other room when the murder happened. That's documented. Oh, don't worry about that. You're overthinking it. Just enjoy it. Don't worry about the facts. It's a murder story. Anybody could. Murder's a concept. But regardless of whether you care about the canon and the continuity stuff, the catalyst here is it's going to take something big to get Kenobi off of Tatooine and away from Luke's side. And what happens? The other child of Anakin, Leia, is kidnapped. And then Bail Organa sends for Kenobi saying, you gotta come save Leia. You're my only hope, basically. He doesn't use those exact words, but basically he says that. And Kenobi doesn't want to do it at first and says, I'm not the man I used to be, etc. And yet, Bail Organa convinces him this is important, so he comes out of hiding and goes to rescue Leia, and they embark on quite an adventure. And this adventure includes Inquisitors, Darth Vader, and Kenobi clashing again, or previously to Episode 4, Owen and Beru in a fight. I mean, all kinds of stuff. Now, by the way, it's also great to see Jimmy Smits back as Bail Organa. It's unfortunate, though, that we also get to see him back as turning into kind of an idiot. But more on that later. Now, having Leia in it also creates some issues, because it doesn't seem like Leia ever had an adventure with Kenobi before that she mentioned in Episode 4. And that's something a lot of people have been taking issue with. I think that's a valid point, and I'll talk a lot more about the Leia problem later. Now, by the way, the problem is not the actress or even the way they write her, actually. I thought that she came across good, and the girl does a great job. That's not the problem. The problem is it really makes a lot of her things she says and does in Episode 4 odd. Also, it turns out that Owen and Obi-Wan / Ben now thinks that Anakin is dead. They don't know that Anakin is Darth Vader. That really struck me as odd and a weird interpretation. I mean, really? Which is interesting, because if they're hiding Leia and Luke so closely, are they hiding him just from the Empire in general, or from the Emperor maybe? And no, it seemed to me, I always got the interpretation they were kind of hiding him from Vader specifically. I mean, even Vader says that, Obi-Wan was wise to hide you from me. That's my horrible Darth Vader impression. I gotta work on that again. I used to be okay at it. Not amazing, mind you, but okay. So what happens here, though, is it turns out Reva is the one who arranged for Leia to be kidnapped, because somehow she's figured out that if she does, it'll bring Obi-Wan Kenobi out of hiding. That's a pretty big assumption. She doesn't even know if he's still alive. But she makes this gamble, and it pays off. But she gets Obi-Wan, and Obi-Wan faces Vader again, gets his butt kicked because he doesn't have the Force, back all the way. And then Leia gets basically taken to a dark Imperial fortress where she's questioned harshly by Reva, who looks like a Sith, about where the new Rebel Alliance might be. Does this sound familiar? Yes, because they already did this in the future in Episode 4. This mirrors and almost copies what happens to Leia again in Episode 4 a little bit too much. I was kind of like, even though I was enjoying the ride, even in the moment, I was like, okay, guys, this is really repetitive here, even though they do it in kind of a fun way. But I felt like Reva doing this. I know that people have talked a lot about the Reva character. The Reva character starts off very interesting. She's a good actress, very bold, takes some crazy risks, but they pay off almost too well. I mean, here, she takes the little kid, Leia, to the fortress to be interrogated about the rebels. Like, she assumes this kid's really gonna know, and Leia doesn't really know. But weirder, though, is that when she intercepts Leia, she kills the pilot waiting to take Leia away, this a pilot's working with the New Rebellion. Obviously, Reva knows this. Why would she kill the pilot? That's the guy that would have information that he could reveal under torture about the rebels and the Rebel Alliance. I mean, why kill him but take the kid? Because there's another twist. It seems like she's trying to get the kid there to the fortress to get Kenobi there. But we're not done. Now, by the way, Kenobi comes to the fortress with another helper, rescues Leia under his trench coat, which this got made fun of because it should have been. It looked ridiculous. And then I love the articles that come out, the shills for Disney Star Wars, that they'll defend anything Disney Star Wars does, no matter what it is. Come out and they're like, well, the trench coat just says more about the Empire's practices of child bartering than it really does about how... Okay, come on, guys. This looks ridiculous. Obi Wan Kenobi in this does not look anything like he's an agent of the Empire. On top of that, he's got this obvious giant kid under his coat. let's just say everyone thought it looked ridiculous in the moment. Please don't try to defend that. And then, of course, Kenobi gets away, and Vader comes, and he's furious at Reva, and starts to force choke her, but she says she put a tracker on the ship. And he lets her go. Oh, okay, fine. Oh, okay, fine. I didn't buy that. I like seeing Vader in this show, by the way, but I don't believe he would let her go. I mean, Vader killed people for nothing lots of times in this show and in Empire Strikes Back. You annoy him a little bit as one of his admirals, you're dead. And here's the new admiral. I mean, that happened so many times it was hilarious. Well, here he lets her go and kind of backs down, and I'm like, that doesn't seem like Vader to me. Even though overall he did seem like Vader. But now we get to what I call the motivational twist. This is a plot point. The motivational twist is in a story when you find out that all the actions of a main character are for ulterior reasons, hidden from not just the audience, but also the other characters. Now, this is a hard thing to pull off. It can be done, but they don't pull it off here. I mean, and here it's combined with another one of my terms you've seen me use, the assumption junction. And people like Bail Organa acting like an idiot. And when you get all that together, it's a perfect storm of insanity and convoluted plotting that begins to undercut the otherwise very entertaining show. Because it turns out that all the actions that Reva did and all of these assumptions she made were really to get Vader to come to Kenobi in a way that leaves him vulnerable so that Reva can kill Vader, because it turns out she was a youngling, slaughtered at the beginning, or not, she wasn't slaughtered, she survived being slaughtered when at one of the Jedi temples many of the, Padawans were killed by Vader when he was freshly turned, and she remembers that because she survived it, even though he stabbed her right through with a lightsaber. And this is where I began to question a lot of things here. So let's talk about this aspect. She fulfills the assumption junction beats. An assumption junction is when major plot points come together, character junctions, because a main character assumes someone will do something, but they don't really know that they'll do that. But then that assumption comes true and leads you to another assumption, which has to come true, which leads you to another assumption, which has to come true. And if one of these doesn't happen, the whole thing is derailed. It's not like when you have an old wise sage like Gandalf, Dumbledore, or the old Obi Wan Kenobi, who knows the people really well, knows what they'll do, or knows that some prophecy or has to come true for destiny or fate. Reva assumes kidnapping Leia will make Bail Organa contact Kenobi, who she's assuming is even alive and even has force powers, which he doesn't anymore. And she says to her, she is questioning. This show adds a lot of lines of dialogue said to just kind of get you as the viewer to not question the weird decisions they're making. Like she says to her, one of her thugs is like, well, how do we know Kenobi will come? She's like, he helped her father in the war, he'll come. He helped her father in the war, that's it? What if he's dead? What if he doesn't have the Force anymore? What if he's too scared? I mean, I don't know. Even Leia makes this. She says, they grabbed me to get you. How does Leia know that? Little Leia. And then she assumes he will reveal himself. And by the way, all these things do happen. It's almost like, how could she have known all this? Now, if she did know all this, this could have been a really interesting plot point. This could have been a really way to make her character even better, which was saying maybe she has some super powerful Force connection in a way that she could have foreseen all of this. Well, apparently not. Because while everything in those setups and assumptions she has goes perfectly, everything in her conclusions goes to crap. I mean, to the point where it's almost like, did you just totally lose your foresight? Because you were doing great there, you were like batting 1,000, but then, wow, oh, what happened? I mean, your hot streak just vanished. Because it turns out when she finally gets Vader in the position she's set up for, she gets her butt kicked, she's left for dead, and only by some Dumbo fluke does she find out about Luke on Tatooine, which sets up the final episode. I mean, if your motive was to get Vader this close, is this the only way in 10 years you've been able to do this as an Inquisitor? And all she gets here is the chance to be on one-on-one, with Vader to surprise him. She hasn't had a better way of doing that in 10 years. And it gets her nothing. But there's another twist. Vader knew who she was. He remembers her slaying all her friends and stabbing her at the temple and left her alive on purpose. He says, "Do you not think I didn't see?" Okay, so is he saying he saw that she could be turned to the dark side eventually? Or that he's saying, I saw you would turn to the dark side and then you would eventually try to kill me? If that's true, it seems like he would have offed her in the previous episode when he had the chance. Like he offs anybody that crosses him. I don't know. But whether or not you like her journey or the motivational twist, almost everyone I know, though, did hate one aspect of this final chapter in the show. Her going to Tatooine. And actually, she goes there and has a pretty cool fight with Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru. Something I never thought I'd see. And she does a good job. I mean, they do a good job holding their own. Now, she's wounded. I'm at least glad they show that she's injured. I'm surprised that she got stabbed a second time all the way through with the lightsaber and didn't die and is able to get up the next day. But, whatever. But the problem is, the only way she even knows everything in her journey in that sixth episode is all because Bail Organa happens to leave a stupid message for Obi-Wan. Bail Organa basically leaves a message saying, haven't heard from you. I know we're not supposed to break radio silence, but hope you haven't found out about the boy on Tatooine. Are you kidding me? Okay, this guy is supposed to be a powerful, influential member of the Alliance. He has to deal in secrecy and codes. But then he risks all of this by leaving a message that could easily fall into the wrong hands, which it does. Or, it's like, gee, I hope Vader doesn't find out. That's like leaving a note on your door when you're gone for potential burglars, like, please don't look under the mat. There's not a key there or anything. I mean, come on. My brother said this is one of the dumbest character decisions in all of Star Wars, and I would agree with that. And the sad part about that is, for Reva's story, which could have been really cool, everything she does in that last episode is because of just happening to find this dumb message left on the sand a few feet from where she falls after being stabbed. That's it. That's so, for all the assumption junctions we've had, to have all of it, the last act, hinge on that is really weak. And then she goes to Tatooine, has a cool adventure there while Kenobi and Vader face off again. And they have quite a good fight, by the way. I'll talk more about that in a second. And Reva has a good fight, but you realize, and then she can't kill Luke. So she realizes she questions everything. And I didn't buy that. She's killed a lot of kids, clearly, who are force sensitive, but suddenly she can't kill Luke. I don't know. I didn't quite buy that. Because, see, instead of what it is that bugs me is they took a cool character like Reva and they turned her into a mover and shaker. And if you watch my term on this, I talk about a mover and shaker is basically someone who moves the plot along and then shakes things up and makes sure that fights and conflict happen. But their own integrity to their character and their own motivations can change and are not consistent based on what's needed for the plot. And in here, everything that she does or happens to her, whether it's chance, whether she's left alive after being stabbed, or accidentally finds out about this Tatooine thing, it's all doesn't matter because she's just there to move things along to make sure these fights and conflicts happen. I felt like it's like Disney was like, they did all this to go, you fans of Star Wars, you like Vader, right? Okay. You like Leia, right? Oh, well, they were all running around during this time period between episodes 3 and 4. So, the story here unfolds. We just want to make sure that we get Leia, we get Vader, even Aunt Beru and Owen, all running into each other in some way. And that's what the fans want. So we gotta figure some convoluted story to do that. Reva's choices are designed to make all that happen. And other people doing dumb things move her plot along. This is again where I actually really feel that a lot of people at Disney Star Wars don't understand the fans. Fans care more about you honoring the characters and the world they're in and the lore and the story way more than just the nostalgia. I mean, if you honor the Star Wars world properly and the characters properly, the nostalgia aspect is built in. It's not the point. And by the way, I feel sympathy for Moses Ingram here because she's a talented actor. She has to sell all the convoluted and contradictory actions of her character, and she does. She makes it convincing. But she has to sell where Disney, I felt, didn't give her what she needed. Like, why couldn't they make her more of a detective and really find Luke by her own calculations? Why do they have to make her find Luke on Tatooine by some stupid message? You know? Now, first of all, any questions you have about this show are going to be shut down by many of the media publications. Like this Hollywood Reporter article, there's a couple others, this one specifically, it reads like it was bought and paid for by Disney. I mean, look, the Kenobi show's not bad, but it's nothing close to brilliant, as they say here, and it raises just as many questions as it answers. A specific example here is this author writes, like, now fans know that Obi-Wan evaded Vader's clutches not once, but twice before Episode 4, even defeating the Sith Lord in their most recent duel. Not exactly. If you're going to write, now the fans know, then you're making the massive assumption that this is what was supposed to have happened with Kenobi all along, but was hidden from the fans. But no. These show writers, they had nothing to do with writing either the original trilogy, the prequels, or even the Clone Wars, all official George Lucas projects. This is basically, in many ways, glorified fan fiction. As other previous writers have speculated on Kenobi's life here and not told this kind of story. I mean, even George Lucas seems to have implied that it was always understood that between Episode 3 and Episode 4, Kenobi, that was the last time Kenobi and Vader ever fought. I mean, it really does ask questions. It doesn't make a lot of sense with Vader saying, when I left you, I was but the learner. Now I am the master. And that he's been waiting all this time. But if they met up 9 years earlier, and he beat Kenobi one of those times, that kind of waters down the whole fight in Episode 4. I mean, it's like, oh, in that case, they fought a couple of times since that last fight. It's like, so by Episode 4 on the Death Star, they should be like, oh, Kenobi, we're fighting again. All right, let's see who wins this time. You know, like, I mean, and by the way, when Vader and Kenobi fight here, the second fight at least, it's pretty good. And there's some good moments of dialogue. But still, as good as moments were, like, it's not necessary. Now, a couple of the moments that are really good that people have talked about really liking, and that I liked in their fight was there's the moment where he tells Kenobi, you didn't kill Anakin, I did, as Vader, which kind of lets Obi-Wan Kenobi off the hook. And it also lets him, what he tells Luke later, make more sense. But I don't think you needed to have that. And even if you did need to have it, I still wonder where the writing on the show was, because earlier, just a couple episodes earlier, when they have their first fight in this series, Vader tells Kenobi, I'm what you made me. Okay, well, which one is it, Vader? You can't have it both ways. Which is why, again, I felt like this show should have been set like 5 years after The Revenge of the Sith, not 10 years later. I think that the reason they set this show 10 years later was so that Leia can have an adventure with Kenobi as chums. An adventure no one ever seems to have mentioned before. And, you know, so the way she talks to Kenobi in A New Hope, the epic, you know, help me, Obi Wan Kenobi, you're my only hope, is very official and formal, and she seems to refer to him not as someone she personally knows. She says, years ago you served my father in the Clone Wars. It's not like she seems to know him, and it seems more like she's reaching out on behalf of her father, not on behalf of herself, when she's the one who's really in trouble here. The show producers, by the way, seem to be aware of this problem, which is interesting. And they kind of have Kenobi, you know, at the end of the show, tell her we gotta kind of act, we don't know each other, etc. Okay, you know what? And I've heard people try to use that as a justification. Well, she doesn't want to reveal the personal connection with her and Kenobi when she's sending that message. You mean that traitorous message against the Empire? That's ridiculous. The jig is up at the beginning of A New Hope, Episode 4. When she's sending that message, it's over for her. She's being captured. Her ship is taken. Even C-3PO says there'll be no escape for the princess this time. Yes, it doesn't matter that why would she hide her personal connection from Kenobi now? I mean, why not appeal to that personal connection that they had? Remember how you saved me before? You risked everything. Kenobi, can you risk it again? Because now she's not only, I mean, even if she doesn't reveal that she knows him, she's asking him to help with these stolen plans to commit treason against the Empire. And she's now captured. The jig is up. I don't buy that explanation. But that isn't the only Leia problem. The other Leia problem to me really is her whole repeat in advance of her episode 4 story. You know, she gets captured, taken to the fortress, tortured about the rebels, and then it happens again 9 years later, which she never mentions that either. And then they do this again to Rey in The Force Awakens, where she gets taken and questioned by Kylo Ren. And guys, come up with a better plot line. This is the third time you're doing this now. No, and I really hated Bail Organa being such an idiot by leaving this message. I mean, that was just something that took me out of the show. And I'm glad other people saw this. I got to give credit to Jeremy Johns, who's a fantastic reviewer, by the way. I wish I was as cool as him. Love you, Jeremy. But I think after I did all my notes and my initial review, I was kind of rewatching some other reviews in the background. I heard him say, this show turns a lot of people like Bail Organa into idiots. Yes, that was something that did annoy me. And even Vader. I mean, Vader here, he leaves Reva alive like 3 times now? I mean, come on, you're asking for her to try to kill you. Like, it's kind of bizarre. Like, they say here, because they kind of, you know, the other Inquisitors don't seem to like Reva because she's from the gutter or something. They imply, and then when they leave her for dead, they're like, we're going to leave you in the gutter where we found you. Okay, no. The Empire doesn't leave people in the gutter. The Empire kills people. The Empire ties up loose ends. Leaving Reva alive is leaving untied a major loose end. Now, the Empire knows that Kenobi helped the Organas, helped Leia, and we got people out there that know Anakin is Luke's kid. I mean, that Luke is Anakin's kid. I think about that for a minute. I mean, wouldn't that have cursed the Organas? How could they have any secrecy of any kind after that, after all this went down? See, this is where I think what they could have done to improve things is have Obi Wan Kenobi help without revealing himself. Not tell maybe Leia who he really is, or help as the mysterious hero from the shadows. To me, that would have worked a lot better and would have been, you know, a pretty cool journey for both Leia and Kenobi. So I think that one way they could have improved this show was not by having it 10 years later. It could have been 5 years later. I think it would have improved, you know, maybe, because I mean, 10 years later, what have you been doing with the Force, Obi-Wan? You were supposed to go train with Qui-Gon at the end of episode 3. What have you been doing for 10 years? Because at the very end, Qui-Gon appears and is like, oh, you weren't ready. Really? So in the end, like I say, this show is fun. It's entertaining, but it feels like glorified fan fiction at the end of the day, because so many things happen that make you question, wait, what about this? And even if you're not a fan, like I said, there are contradictions and a lot of assumptions that are made, and people doing dumb things to sometimes move the plot along. So, but I want to know what you think. Please leave your comments below, and please subscribe. We are trying to get this station going big time, so all the subscriptions will really help, and then you'll get all the updates and news and new videos. And I'm going to be doing a lot next week, too, because it's going to be the Comic-Con, San Diego International Comic-Con. I will be there doing some live videos and updates. I'm Nathan from WAKA Geek Talk. Please follow us at Geek Talk, at WAKA Geek Talk on YouTube, Facebook, and online. And I will catch you all next time.